The journey of business is incredibly hard. And the amount of lessons I've learned over the last 13 years, I always wish I had this video. And so I wanted to take a moment to share the 9 lessons in business that I wish I knew when I started. I wanted to do it in a way, just driving, imagining I've picked you up and we're having a conversation. My name's Frank Grief. I co-founded a business with my 2 brothers and we sold it for $180 million. Let's go. Lesson number 1. You need to back yourself because no one else will. When I started the first business, I don't think this was as clear, but now the second time going around, I've realized that you have to have so much conviction in yourself and so much self-belief, because like starting a business, it doesn't really matter what the product is you're doing, whether it be a crowded space or whether it be a brand new sector. Like you're diving into the abyss. And so many people in your life are gonna try and protect you is the right way to say it. Like if you tell friends and family and you have a job, they're gonna be like, oh, are you sure, Frank? Like, I'm not sure about that. That sounds like a risk. And then other people are just gonna flat out not believe in you. And so the only consistent thing is your self-belief. And you need to have this feeling like, I see things that others do not, and I'm willing to take risks that others are not. And you're backing yourself every step of the way, because like I said, no one else is gonna do it. The second lesson is one that it doesn't matter if you're starting, you're at the middle of the journey, or you're on to round 2. Speed is one of the most underrated things that you can have in business and in life. And the cool thing I get to do is I get to kind of reflect over the 13-year journey. And I go what is one thing that I consistently did and my brothers consistently did that has made the biggest impact? And there's this concept when it comes to money about compounding interest and compounding returns. So if you put $100 in the bank, you earn 10%. Next year you have $110 and now you're earning interest on that. And the same thing applies to speed. The compound return of when you do things incredibly fast. And so if you take a decision and your time between decision and execution is faster than anybody else, as you look back, you have so much more time to do things because you're moving at such a pace that others are not. And this comes down to really micro things. And I see this so much with first-time founders. They over-analyze and they get so critical over small little decisions oh, my logo has to be perfect. My messaging on my landing page has to be perfect. But also people in the later stage of business, they're really focusing and fixating on decisions. But the reality is a decision is better than no decision. So taking 6 months to move forward, inside a corporate business when you do 22 meetings to look at a slide deck to finally make a decision, the truth is a decision is better than no decision. And so you look at a corporate business where they have 22 meetings to make a single decision how we're going to move forward. You could have done 10 decisions prior to that. And through every time you move fast on a decision, you can actually then learn from it. And so the best way to look at this is realize if you have the sense of I only want to do something that is perfect, and especially for an early stage founder, your view of perfection is not yet grounded in the market. And so chasing this thing that you believe, well, it's not truthful in any way, shape or form. The only way you know what perfection is you're getting feedback, and the feedback is from your customers and they're buying the product and the revenue's going up, or they're not clicking on the ad, whatever it is, that will help you get better. And so what you need to do is compress the timeline between having a decision and acting on it. The third lesson is a bit spicy, but a lot of people get anxious through the process of either building a business or being in business. And you have to realize anxiety is part of the process. It's a feature, not a bug. When your business is growing and there's stress and the customers are coming back at you and there's problems that are happening and that anxiety you feel that you want to push forward, that's a feature. It's a privilege. The only reason you're feeling that way is because you are getting stretched as a person. And the cool thing you get to realize the longer you're in the game is the thing that stressed you out, the thing that created anxiety for you this year, you'll look back in a year and you'll laugh at it because that no longer stresses you out and now needs something to be even bigger and even more dramatic and bigger revenue to get you to that level of stress. But you have to realize if you don't have that anxiety or that stress, there's actually a problem because maybe you're not pushing yourself. Maybe you're not growing. Maybe you're stagnant. Now, I'm not suggesting you have to be stressed at all times, but sometimes there are seasons in building a business that you are almost on your fight or flight response for a few months at a time. But that's part of your process to grow. And the only reason, the same way when you go to the gym and you need to apply pressure and strain to your muscles to be able to grow, It's exactly the same for humans and in business, because you need that stress, you need those pressures to actually push you to make decisions. Stress is a way that your body, it gets you a certain sense of focus. That thing that's stressing you out is going to usually be the most important thing that you have to worry about in your business at that particular time. And so when you feel that, realize that it's part of the process. Lesson 4. And I am so passionate about this lesson. So many people will tell you that you need to focus on systems and processes and get everything that it's so scalable in your business. That's true at a certain point in a business journey. But in the early days, you need to do unscalable shit. Shit that doesn't make sense. Because those are the things that you have the ability to create raving fans. And I'll give you a really good example. If you, the founder of a business, has those early customers and you're getting on the phone to them, you're going and seeing them in their office, you're spending the time with them to build raving fans, that piece of unscalable shit is what helps you then grow from there. I was just with a founder this morning. She's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue. And at the moment, they're doing customer surveys to over 700 customers. And she said to the team, I don't want anybody to respond to these emails. I'm going to personally do them. Logically, that actually doesn't make sense because, having an email correspondence back and forth with the customer, you could probably get a team to do it. But she realizes that actually by doing that, the feeling the customers are going to get, they're a very big business, a very big brand. And so when that customer receives her name in the email signature and knows they're talking to that founder, that's going to feel amazing. And so that is a piece of unscalable shit that is going to have returns that it's hard to quantify them, but you just know in your gut that it's the right thing to do. It's so easy in those early days to try and automate and process yourself out of the process or systemize yourself out of the process. It doesn't mean it's the right thing. And the longer you're prepared to do unscalable shit, the bigger the outcome can be. It changes its form over business. And I'll give you my live example. It was year 8 in our business. We were doing about $38 million in revenue. And there was a customer that I've been trying to close for about 5 years. And I got on the plane to them personally as a CEO. We had a team of 400. And I got on the plane to them 20 times to fly from Sydney to Melbourne. Because I knew that being in that room and having the founder of the business, not just a salesperson, was going to make an impact. Now that's not scalable. That doesn't necessarily make sense, but I knew for the customer it would make such a big impact. And the longer you can hold on to this, the bigger the outcome. Lesson number 5, and this is one that kind of brings a smile to my face, so you can probably see that by now, is this concept of being cringe. And I think the more cringe you are, the better. And the closer you are to your objective. So if I take this in the context of content, that first time you get in front of a camera, it's gonna feel so cringe. The first time you hit post, you're gonna be like, oh, my friends, my family, it's gonna feel gross and wrong. And that's why you should be doing it. And it doesn't just mean for content is cringe. Cringe is in so many different formats, just putting yourself out there, speaking into the world what you want to do and what you want to achieve and being authentically you. People will say to you, oh, that's cringe. And when you're successful, they'll ask, how did you do it? Because they're not prepared to do it themselves. If you think about where we are in 2025 and how many businesses and how much saturation there is from a marketing perspective, cringe is often the thing that will cut through, that will stop the scroll. Now, I don't mean you, the founder, has to be building a personal brand, but I just mean from a marketing perspective, what are you doing that gets people's attention? And often that thing is seen as cringe. When you're the first person to a trend or a new idea, it's novel and no one's seen it before. And that means people can be like, ooh, I can't believe you did that, until you find something that breaks through and then people start replicating it. And once people are replicating it, something becomes no longer cringe. And then you're kind of you're not at the right place anymore. You're now doing what the masses are doing. And so being unique is often the same as being cringe. Here's something that's not related to marketing and content, and you can imagine and feel the cringe. Melanie Perkins from Canva. It took 100 no's from venture capitalists before she got her first check. And you can kind of put yourself in her shoes for a moment. She's at investor number 92. They're asking about the product, and she's sharing the vision. She goes home that night and someone asks her how did you go? I got another no. And you can probably feel it. The person's oh, Mel, you're at 93 now. Surely you can't keep going. But then she kept going. And at 100, she got a yes, and they're worth over $50 billion. And so that willingness to push through when others are a bit oh, I don't know. That's what it's going to take to get the outcome that she's got. Lesson number 6 is one I learned really early on in business. And I think I'm really fortunate that it came to me. And it was this concept of an unfair advantage. So I'm a huge believer that every founder and every individual has an unfair advantage that no one else has, and that you should really own that and double down. And I'll give you an example. In the early days of Real Hub, my unfair advantage, which I quickly realized, was I was a 24-year-old salesperson selling a product that we had built, and I was going head to head with my competitors, and they were double my age or double and a half. So when I sat down with a real estate agent or principal, they were usually twice my age. And what happened a lot of the times is like, they would look at me and there was a bit of like admiration. Like they're like, wow, like they're like a bit startled that I was prepared to sit in front of them to negotiate pricing and talk with such conviction about a product. And it was almost like they looked at me like, you know, with a twinkle in their eye going, you're like my son, you know, like I'm so young. So they saw that as they were then instantly attracted to having that conversation because it was unique. And so that was my unfair advantage at that particular point in time. Another example was I was the salesperson, but I was also the customer service person, and I was also the person who was delivering the product. And so what that meant is my unfair advantage as a salesperson is I could sit eye to eye with a customer and say to them, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you get your product in time. And I could say that because I didn't have to go back to my corporate office and then go convince the delivery team. I knew it because I made the promise and I was going to do it. As our business grew to 400 people, like I no longer had that unfair advantage because, well, number one, I was no longer the salesperson. Number two, I wasn't a customer support. And number three, like I wasn't going to be delivering the product. And so then I had to figure out like, what is it at that particular point in time is my unfair advantage and what to press on. And so the key here is just to understand, like, it doesn't matter who you are, what stage of the journey you're at, just realize like you have an unfair advantage. Here's a contrarian take. Like in business, if you can find something that is unfair, provided that it's ethical, work with that. Like everybody talks about, recently I heard Peter Thiel talk about this conversation, which was, you know, everybody talks about competition is such a great thing. And it is, it's a great thing for a consumer. But actually like the golden goose is monopoly. Like how do you become one of one and how do you use that to your advantage? And so as an individual, as a founder, like find your one of one thing and double down on that. Do you want a Coke Zero? Oh, fuck off. Let's have a Coke Zero. Hello?
Hi there, what can I get for you?
Hey there, do you sell Fanta?
Yes, we do.
Awesome, can I grab 2 Coke Zeros?
Oh my god, I knew that was coming.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yes. It's such an innocent joke. I saw it the other day. Thank you. Thanks, Legend. Thanks, man. Have a good one. Lesson number 7. This is something that's true in the beginning of your journey all the way to the end. Communication solves every problem. Let me explain. The art of communicating, I think, is probably the most important skill that you can have in your entire business. And what I mean by that is because like if you boil everything down from like a first principle standpoint, right to the basic, everything is reliant on your ability to communicate. When you first start, you need to be able to communicate your vision to other people. You need to be able to sell them on why they should buy your product. And so by being good at that, it's going to help you convert more people. You then need to be able to convince employees or team members to join your business. And so you need to be able to communicate the vision and with absolute conviction and certainty of like why they should join you, because there's lots of other jobs they can join. There's more secure businesses. It's a risk working with a startup. And so like, why should they join you? And as you go along your journey, you might have to communicate with investors or go through the sale of your business. Like there's so many points in time where everything is solved with communication. And so like as a skill, I see this as something that so many people forget to focus on and hone their craft. In the early days, I would record every sales pitch, and anytime I did content or I was on a podcast, and I would listen back to it and I ask myself a really simple question. If I were to do this again, what's one thing I could change? How could I get better? What is the ums, the ahs, the likes, the ands? How could I say the same thing with as fewer words as possible? To really like boil down and crystallize exactly what you're trying to communicate. And if you look at the best of the best and the people who were able to build amazing companies like a Steve Jobs, he did that because when he got on stage, he was infectious with the way he talked about Apple and building insanely good products. There wasn't a single word out of place. And that ability to communicate is one like you have to master. Not sponsored by Coke. Lesson number 8, and this is one I've come to the realization only in the last couple of years, but the longer you're prepared to do shit that doesn't make sense, the bigger the outcome. Let me explain. In those early days of business, we start to do things, your business starts to grow. And there's a certain point comes where you decide, I'm gonna get a team, and then you start realizing like, oh, certain things are beneath me. And before you know it, you're only doing a certain type of thing in your business. But there's certain shit that doesn't necessarily make sense that you do it, but if you do it, the outcome will be so great. And so let me explain in my life. I've gone through this business, I've sold it. In theory, I have enough money that I can go chill on an island and do nothing. But instead I go and start a podcast. And for the podcast, what I do is each episode I cook for the guest. Now that doesn't make sense because it's not a great use of my time, but what it does is it builds a really incredibly strong bond with that guest, which then helps them have the best conversation they've ever had. Let me give you another example. We started the founders table. We invite 8 people over to my own home. Again, I cook for these 8 people and we have a conversation with 8 other founders who are doing over $10 million in revenue. There is no reason that I should be the one cooking. Again, my time is worth a lot. I'm spending about 2.5 hours cooking for these people. But the reason I'm doing it is because the impact that has on someone, they realize like, you don't need to be doing this. This is a lot of your time and you've done this for me. And so the impact and the feeling that you give them is like, wow, like you really, really care. And so I'm doing that because I'm like fast tracking the ability to have incredible relationships with people. And I realize that those relationships can have a huge impact on me and my business. And so for you in your world, like there is stuff that that if you do, is going to have a huge impact. And even though it's gonna feel weird, like maybe I shouldn't need to do this, or I don't need to do this, or it's beneath my pay grade, like realize there's certain things that if you do and shit that you do that doesn't make sense, it will provide a huge outcome. Lesson number 9, you've hung out with me all the way to the end. And I probably should say these aren't in any particular order, but the final one for me, and it doesn't matter what the business you're in, if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this lesson right now. Your job as a founder of a business, as a leader, you need to be able to attract great talent and put them in positions that they can thrive. Every problem in business is solved with people. It's solved with finding the right person for a job and the right talent. And so you have to get really, really good at being able to find amazing people. And sometimes that you may not have the money to go and spend $300,000 to find the best of the best. But then your job is to find like, how do you find someone that maybe yet doesn't see the talent in themselves right now? And you have the ability to see that, nurture it, and make them an amazing person and make them amazingly good at their job. If you think about someone like Elon Musk, like regardless of controversy or whatever, how is it that he's been able to build like 6 or more multi-billion-dollar businesses? Like he physically can't be at every one of these businesses, but it's because he has this amazing ability to find incredible people and get them to do their life's best work. And I hate the word empower because it sounds a bit lame, but like empower them to do incredible things. And then he has the trust that like, as he sits over the top of all these different businesses, he has the trust that they're gonna be able to deliver. And so whatever you can do to become a magnet for talent and be one where people can thrive and have their life's best work, do that. So I hope in the 25 minutes that you've invested, you've been able to share in these key lessons that I wish I knew at the start of building a business. Now, I'm not a YouTuber if I don't tell you to hit that like button, subscribe, throw a comment, like just throw a comment. You'll notice I respond to them. I enjoy that. And if there's other videos or other conversations you want me to have, just let me know. Follow along and let's catch up next time.